Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rotten Tomatoes is Wrong. It's your girl, Jacqueline, and I'm back with my beloved co-host, Mr. Mark Ellis. How you doing, Mark?
Beloved, wow. This is an upgrade. I will tell everybody that I got a very special invitation. I cannot say what it's pertaining to, but it's an exclusive guest list that Jacqueline hooked me up with. So,
oh, yes, I did.
Very excited about that.
There may be Instagram photos that some of you may see soon of me and Mark out in the wild. That's all I will say.
Yeah, we're going to make everybody peanut butter and jelly, especially jelly.
But of course, we're back again with another episode. And this time, this is a highly requested, highly talked about. I feel like every 6 months on Twitter, people are going off about how much they love this film. And shout out to Lizzie from Guadalajara. She is one of Mark's followers on Twitter, and she has been begging for us to cover a Brendan Fraser film. This is the episode, this is the time, because we are talking about the 1999 classic, The Mummy, which is currently rated at 61% fresh on the Tomatometer, but has a 75% audience score. So let's just talk about it. Brendan Fraser, who, Mark, did you read his GQ? Have you been following this resurgence?
I was going to do a deep dive into Brendan Fraser last night, and I got swept away watching not only The Mummy, but then The Mummy Returns. And I mean, I know a lot about Brendan Fraser just because I've been a huge fan of his ever since I saw the movie in theaters that I wanted to talk about. Encino Man didn't get enough support from the brass, and so now we're talking about The Mummy instead, which is fine. He still actually does get a scene where he looks like Link from Encino Man in this movie.
I was just about to say that. Little Encino Man shout out at the beginning.
But I mean, yeah, so you follow sort of what he's been through, what his career, what his life has been through in the last couple decades. It's I'm so happy that we are having this appreciation for Brendan Fraser resume and have fans all over the world say, no, you know what? We love the guy now, and we loved his movies back in the 90s.
I think this might be a little bit of love fest, guys. I have to say. So if you're not in for that, you might want to just turn us down a little bit. But Eric Striffler, creator and co-host of Pretty Much It, his YouTube channel, he is with us today. And so, Eric, I have to ask you, is Rotten Tomatoes wrong about The Mummy?
Rotten Tomatoes is wrong. 61%?
Yes.
It's a travesty. It's disgusting. And I have a huge problem with that.
Good. I said.
That is not a passing grade, is it? That's not a passing grade.
It's barely a D. It's barely a D.
No, you're still get a degree with a 61%. And I know from personal experience, okay? You still get a diploma if you have a D- average.
Yeah, but You're not getting any good jobs. Just remember that. Nobody is recommending you for the coveted internship with D's.
I have a great job. I have many great jobs.
None of which is what you went to school for, though. But that is this industry, let's be honest. Mark, though, let's go ahead and use that Jesuit and Wake Forest education of yours, sir, if you don't mind, and give us the plot breakdown and the pertinent partners of The Mummy, if you will,
It is a Baptist school. I don't know if it was First or Southern. It's not affiliated with the Baptist Church at all, so we might as well get into, speaking of religion, we're going all the way back to BC times, which is even before Bart Starr led the Packers to the very first Super Bowl championship. This is the 1200s BC. You got this high priest Imhotep, and Imhotep, you know what? Guys, am I right? He has an affair with the one person he's not supposed to have an affair with, so he gets cursed for all eternity. He's buried alive. It's not a good situation back then in Thebes, which is in Egypt. And so then you cut to slightly more modern times where now we are in AD and we have Brendan Fraser around the 1900s, 1920s, I'd say. He's an adventurer and he gets very close because he is being chased by an army. He gets very close to kind of discovering this sort of lost city. And then he gets locked up for a couple of years. And then there's this librarian played by Rachel Weisz and her brother. They decide to go on this quest to discover this lost city as well because they have part of a map. They run into Brendan Fraser. They bail him out of jail. And now we're off on this adventure where it's a race against time. It's a race against other factions. And once we get to that city, it's also a fight against pure, cursed, mummified evil to survive. And it's a rollicking adventure that feels in the vein of Indiana Jones. And maybe it's one of those movies that the film Jungle Cruise is like, hey, we want to kind of be like Indiana Jones, but maybe a little bit of the Mummy vibe too. Released back in 1999. And Jacqueline, the kids still love it today.
I am with that that incredible synopsis, Mark. Although I will say, because it's like maybe like the more classic film fan in me, let's be honest. Actually, The Mummy was ripping off Romancing the Stone, which was ripping off Sierra Madre. So it's like it's all a ripoff of a ripoff of a ripoff. But that is neither here nor there. Let's go ahead and bring Eric back to us. So you gave us a little bit of a tease of why Rotten Tomatoes is wrong, but like break it down for us. Why do you love this film? Why do you feel that it's wrong?
Well, I should say right out of the gate here, since this is an audio medium, you'll have to read it for me, but I'm going to stand up and show you what I'm wearing real quick. If you could describe it as you see it. What are you seeing here?
Oh, I see Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz on a T-shirt, and it says "The Mummy 1999 is perfect."
Yeah,
that is a great shirt, sir. And they will
I wear
see
this proudly everywhere I go.
This does go up on YouTube and like on our streaming platform O&O, so people will get to see that.
People will get to see it. Yes,
yeah.
I get compliments everywhere I go. I can tell you, just even my opinion aside, I get compliments everywhere I go wearing this shirt. I was just at a bar recently, and the bartender was absolutely loving it, and so people are still loving it. People are still talking about it. So it's not just me that I think I'm speaking for the people here when I say that this thing needs to be higher. This score, and you said the audience score is only 75, but I think that it's only because like Rotten Tomatoes, this is all everything with The Mummy is all back. You have to go back and review it again if you want it to be like really coming up on Rotten Tomatoes. And I don't think people are going back. If Rotten Tomatoes was around when it came out, I guarantee that all the scores would be much higher. I think that the critic scores maybe would be higher, but the audience score would be through the roof. I think.
Yes. I agree with you on that one. Also, though, real quick, I want to shout out Producer Lucy because she was absolutely losing it when she got to see your shirt. Like, literally stood up in the chair.
I know. I wanted to keep it a surprise.
Oh, that blew me away. Listen, I'm feeling the love right now. This movie, I'm going to steal from Stefan from SNL. This movie has everything. It's got sexy suspenders. It's got Rachel Weisz's eyebrows. It's got a sexy mummy and Arnold Vosloo. Is that his name?
Yeah.
I love his little chest and his little tum.
It's got hot. Benny. The great character actor in all of Stephen Sommers' films from the era.
Yeah.
It's got sand. It's got scarab beetles.
Oh,
Brendan
God.
Fraser.
I don't even want to. I honestly feel like the scarabs like go out of my head because they're so freaky and disgusting. Oh,
it really is such a great, like that's scarier in a lot of ways than The Mummy. But
yeah, you don't want the mummy's not crawling into your brain at least.
I know. Mark, I think I know the answer to this because I know you're a man of taste, but go ahead and tell us, is Rotten Tomatoes wrong about The Mummy?
I'll be honest with you, Jacqueline, Eric, Lucy's, I always am 100% shoot from the hip honesty. I think Rotten Tomatoes is exactly right. I think they are exactly right with this movie. I think I can get it to fresh, but if this movie was like 57, 58%, I'd say Rotten Tomatoes is right. It's at 61%. I think Rotten Tomatoes is just fine. I think the movie's good. I think it's enjoyable. Do I think it's an all-time classic? No. Do I think it needs to be hailed as this incredible, life-changing, generation-defining movie? No. It's a fun adventure that's got, a little bit of cheese to it, a little bit of fun to it. I love Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz as the leads. They're my favorite part of the movie. I also love that Arnold Vosloo was one of the bad guys in the Van Damme classic Hard Target, so that is a nice attraction. But again, it's a nice movie to watch. I don't know that it has to be this incredibly hailed and revered movie in 2021. Am I a bad person?
Well, can we just say also Arnold Vosloo villain in Agent Cody Banks? I just want to make sure that's out there too.
Oh, I forgot about Agent Cody Banks.
He's like a side villain.
he's like Jasper, the guy Rufus from the Holiday. He was kind of typecast as a villain, but he does it very well. Mark, you hurt me.
You hurt me too.
A lot with that one. I'm not going to say that your opinion is incorrect, but rewatching this film last night, I just could not Rotten Tomatoes is wrong. It is such a fast moving movie. It really has this incredible pace to it that felt like you're on the adventure with them, which I really love in these adventure type movies. Also, I will correct the record. I said Sierra Madre. I meant to say African Queen, which is the Humphrey Bogart going down the river one. Excuse me. It is early in the morning and it's already award season. So just so you know, guys, my brain capacity goes downhill from here to the Oscars. But But I do think it's wrong. And the great thing about it is you can't cast the kind of chemistry that Rachel and Brendan Fraser can. You can't cast him to be this lovable rogue. Like you either are Harrison Ford, you either are Brendan Fraser, you are Humphrey Bogart, or you aren't. Like you can't, or Michael Douglas in Romancing the Stone. And so I feel like it was a really perfect formula that granted was simplistic. And we also have to look, this is a 20 plus year old movie that has CGI that is pretty passable. Considering how old it is, I'm like telling you, CGI at that time was not this consistent. In fact, one of the sequels, Scorpion King, wishes that it had the CGI of this movie.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
And we will discuss that one there. But before we go ahead and break down all the movie talk and such, we want to go ahead and take a trip back to what the critics and audiences were saying with our favorite segment from our review curation manager, Mr. Tim Ryan. Here we go with 2 Minutes with Tim.
2 minutes with Tim, 2 minutes with Tim, 2 minutes with Tim, 2 minutes with Tim. Tell us what the critics were saying back then. Ooh, 2 minutes with Tim.
Few would make the claim that the 1999 version of The Mummy lives up to the eerie power of the 1932 Boris Karloff classic. But it's going for something completely different, combining the silly thrills of an old-school swashbuckler with state-of-the-art special effects for the time. Whether or not it succeeded is up for debate. It's at 61% on the Tomatometer with 101 reviews, but it does have a 75% audience score. So what did the critics have to say? In a fresh review, Gary Thompson of the Philadelphia Daily News wrote, "The Mummy, quite shamelessly, combines the imagery and serialized thrills of the Indiana Jones movies with the frenetic special effects energy of the Evil Dead movies, and has quite a bit of fun doing so." However, in a rotten review, Todd McCarthy of Variety wrote that The Mummy tries to have it both ways, sending up the adventure genre for laughs while also going for some mild shocks, but the sand slips through its fingers on both counts. The Rotten Tomatoes critics' consensus reads, "It's difficult to make a persuasive argument for The Mummy as any kind of meaningful cinematic achievement, but it's undeniably fun to watch." Well, that's a wrap. Back to you folks.
Well, I have to say, I think Tim definitely, got the vibes and the feel, but I don't know if Tim is a big Mummy fan either. I'm curious about this one.
He didn't sound thrilled. He
didn't sound thrilled.
It was a good finale with "That's a Wrap." I appreciated that.
I mean, also let's talk about it too. This was in the infancy of Rotten Tomatoes. Like Rotten Tomatoes had just barely started up when this film was sort of becoming into the mainstream. These were in the baby days. Rotten
That's
Tomatoes
what I was wondering. Yeah, that's what I was wondering. When I was saying, I wonder if, Rotten Tomatoes was as prevalent then as it is now. I wonder how it would look. That definitely impacts it,
Absolutely. Again, we were out there, definitely not, the huge thing that it is now, but we were out there, and there's still a lot of love to be had about this film. So let's go ahead and talk about why we love it, and we will try to shout down Mark in our movie
I still
talk.
said it could be fresh. I'm fine with it being fresh.
That's not enough. Not for this movie, sir. But it's okay. I don't even need to come for you that hard. The internet will take care of you on this one.
Yeah, you're done, man. You got the shout out early on from someone asking to do this, and now you've lost a fan.
I mean, literally, they're going to turn on you.
Sorry, Lizzie.
Happens to us all. All right, Brian, let's go ahead and go over to movie talk. Cue the music. Okay, I kind of talked about this a little bit when I was talking about why Rotten Tomatoes is wrong, but this movie just moves, and it seems it just goes from great action set piece or really interesting fun setup to great action set piece, interesting fun setup, and the pace of it is incredible. I mean, the movie itself maybe takes place over the course of a long weekend, maybe a few days. But Eric, what is your favorite scene from the movie? Favorite moment that you're like, yes?
There's so many. The whole thing is burned into my brain. So I will say this. What's interesting is I think I saw The Mummy Returns first because I was just old enough to see it in theaters. And then I didn't necessarily realize or care at that age that I was seeing a sequel before the first one. And it doesn't really matter that much. You get the gist. But when I went back and watched The Mummy, I watched it at home and I remember like vividly watching it the first time. And every time I watch it, it feels like I'm transported right back to that. Like it never loses its charm. It's always got the same charm from the very first time I watched it. And so it's hard to pick one scene, but the first thing that always comes to mind, because it feels like the type of thing that I maybe have quoted more often than anything, it's the scene where you're going to know exactly what it is. I'm trying to think of a way to say it where it won't immediately tell you what it is, but the river, when they're on either side of the river, and Brendan Fraser, of course, is on one side with the horses. Oh, sorry, Benny's on one side with the horses, and he says, "O'Connell, I'm on. Looks like who has all the horses." And then, of course, Brendan Fraser says, "Hey, Benny, looks like you're on the wrong side of the river." And I feel like I say that in my life maybe once a week. It somehow makes its way in once a week.
Wow.
O'Connell! Hey! O'Connell! It looks to me like I've got all the horses!
Hey, Benny! Looks to me like you're on the wrong side of the river!
That's a moment, and also his reaction where he kicks at the water. That is a moment that I feel like gets everything. That encompasses like the feeling of the movie where you're like genuinely like, oh no, they don't have the horses. What are they going to do? But then immediately there's a big laugh. Like you said, it's sort of sending up the genre a little bit. And obviously you got the scary stuff in there as well. When I was a kid, it was scary, but I feel like that scene is one that really sticks out to me for sure.
I love that you point to that scene, because that was one of the scenes that I had totally forgot about when I was rewatching the movie, where this is basically the part of the film where we've rescued Brendan Fraser from captivity, where we see him get arrested in the very first scene in the movie. And he looked like the caveman Link from Encino Man when he was in the cage. And then we get him out just before his neck is stretched in a hanging.
They hang him.
He's back to being suave Brendan Fraser, which is one of my favorite scenes in this movie too. Is just that is that change from Rachel Weisz seeing this guy who tried to kiss her when he was in a cage, and then they're like, oh, I don't know about this guy. Then he shows up and he's back to being like suave, cool, that Brendan Fraser, the marquee movie star that we know and love. And then we get on the boat. And so the movie does a really nice job of setting up these sort of factions that this is gold treasure that everybody and their brother and sister are going to be racing after. And so it's like a NASCAR race. It's like you have a bunch of cars that are all vrooming towards this one lost city to find this treasure, or to discover the artifact, or just to, whether they're appreciating history, like the librarian character played by Rachel, or it's just they're treasure hunting like a lot of the other Americans, or it's Brendan Fraser. You just have this thing like that. You're like, hey, I was so close before, I can do this again. I love that setup, but then I'll play off of Eric's scene, Jacqueline, because I'll say what I really did enjoy, and it does harken back to Raiders of the Lost Ark very clearly, is when it's just before dawn and we're all lined up with our camels and we're all looking at each other and we're saying, okay, what is happening here? Are we just in the middle of a desert? And then the sun comes up and it shows us the city that we couldn't see before sunrise, and then we're all just off to the races.
Look at that. Can you believe it? Hominoptera. Here we go again.
That was a cool scene that really got me into the feel of the movie. So, as people know who've listened to this show before, my opinions are very malleable. I think more people could stand to have malleable movie opinions like mine. And so I can be won over, and y'all already starting to get me with the pacing of this movie, because I agree, Eric and Jacqueline, I think that this movie does move brilliantly.
And look, there's just so many movies now. Like, there's been this Twitter thing going on about, like, I will die on the hill that no movie needs to be over 2 hours. And I will say that, like, I am not that person, but I think a lot of movies that should have been under 2 hours aren't. Because people forget this. Pulp Fiction is a 3-hour movie. People forget that.
Geez.
Pulp Fiction is a 3-hour movie, but tell me when you're watching Pulp Fiction if you feel that. No, you feel every vignette. You're in it. You're invested, because every time they switch to a new setup, you're like, what's going to happen next, right? with this character and how is it going to tie into the big story. And this movie does the same. It's just brilliant pacing, and it takes colorful writing to make that happen. But in the moments when it's not moving, it's still interesting. And my scene is actually one of those like not moving moments, is when they get to Hamanatra after Rachel Weisz's character, you know, with her little camel, like, dee, 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 dee. She like makes her way up there, which I loved. I was like, yes, take it to the boys. And they, you know, they found the mummy. The Americans have, you know, enacted the curse, but they haven't yet read from the book. And they are standing there with Glenfiddich, a bottle of Glenfiddich, and it's Rick and it's her, and she's like, mean it. This is something that gets left out of a lot of movies. It's how these two characters sort of fall in love a little bit. And her saying, you know, mean it, and like throwing her thing. And my favorite part is when she comes up so drunk, that is brilliant acting, and she's just like, I am proud of what I am. And I am a librarian. That is, I loved it. I loved it so much. I understand that girl as somebody who also knocks over things unintentionally, but likes books more than people. I lived for that character. I thought it was so well done, and I absolutely love that scene.
What are you doing here?
Oh, look, I may not be an explorer or an adventurer or a treasure seeker or a gunfighter, Mr. O'Connell, but I am proud of what I am.
And what is that?
I am a librarian.
Okay, but she also fell in love with this guy, not when he was smooth Brendan Fraser. When
Here we
he
go.
Was a barbaric sort of hulking mass of a locked up felon, and he grabs her and forces her to kiss him, and she's still thinking about that kiss when we're on the boat that precludes Eric's scene. And so
Listen, she doesn't like that. She likes when he shaves and the music swells. She hears it in her own ears.
But wait a minute. To be fair, one of the biggest books of that time is a book called The Sheik, which is about a man that literally abducts a white woman, kind of similarly to Brendan Fraser in that opening scene. This sort of 1920s woman, she is the reason why romance novels today are so problematic, because that is all those heifers wanted. That is all those heifers wanted. They lived in such these gilded cages that the idea of some dude coming literally to come through the bars to come get them, better than any fantasy they could think up on their own. So I actually say that is true to form.
If Brendan Fraser came through the bars of my window, I would be down to
go
hang out.
Down to clown.
Down to clown, baby.
I would say, look, at least, because a lot of other movies might not have done this, at least Brendan Fraser's character had the class. So once he is on the boat and he's showered and he's thinking in the right frame of mind again, that he says like, oh, maybe it wasn't the best idea.
Yes.
And so, but then immediately she's like, oh, it wasn't a good kiss. She's been thinking about that kiss. She didn't even want clean shaven Brendan Fraser. She wants caveman Encino Man Brendan Fraser.
I find that is actually well written, that like her being so put off by it. No, that is the biggest and best thing that has happened in her life that had anything to do with sex. I guarantee you.
I will also say you're kind of reminding me of something I have a problem with movies today, is that like characters can be flawed as well. And I feel like today a lot of, not that this is necessarily a specific thing that I love about The Mummy, but just what you're talking about here, you know, it like that criticism is like, it's okay to disagree with a character or disagree with their intentions or what they want. And like sometimes we want things that we shouldn't, you know, whatever, in a weird situation. And I think that today everything's a little too clean. Like you mentioned Jungle Cruise earlier, I think, right? Which Jungle Cruise, by the way, the introduction of Emily Blunt's character literally copy pasted from the introduction of Rachel Weisz's character from The Mummy. Let's be clear. But like we're talking like on the ladder in the library vibes, the exact same thing. But it sort of like in that movie, like they're perfect, they're clean, like everything is just like, you know, squeaky clean. I feel like in something like that. And then back then, yeah, you could like disagree with their intentions or disagree with their actions, but Brendan or Rachel, but that's okay. I think that's fine.
That's a great point. Yeah. And I would say that I don't think it'd be out of character for Henry Jones Jr. or Sr. for that matter to attempt the same thing in an Indiana Jones movie. So
Totally.
I don't think I'm not going to bury the movie like they buried Arnold Vosloo, but it's just like, really, that's the thing. That's the kiss, really.
I mean, look, again, I'm not going to be, I was with it. I believed it. Also too, like I kind of feel for the characters just because all of the people in this were also having to deal with the fact that they were acting against tennis balls at a time when acting against tennis balls was like not a thing. Like,
Right. Yeah.
like it's so funny. I always use this quote, but Jake Gyllenhaal, when he did Mysterio and Spider-Man, he was like turning to Tom Holland, who's been like, Jake Gyllenhaal did his first movie when he was like 6. And this dude has been doing movies for better part of 3 decades, but he had never done such a heavy CGI effort.
Right.
He's turning to Tom Holland like, hey, how do I do this? Because
Yeah, I
there's
don't envy
nothing
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
jeez.
But look at this. I mean, I think it's a testament to this film because, they didn't know what Imhotep was going to look like. They didn't know if the CGI at that point was even going to live up to that. This was such a new medium. I mean, they thought they could be in like, a bad version of like Hans coming off of the tower in Die Hard. They didn't know. But I think the VFX really is a testament to why this film is still beloved because you don't feel that like, I don't
Yeah,
like
tell
this.
me there. And Mark, you tell me when you just watched it and you're having some problems with it. You buy that the mummy's in the room with them, don't you?
I do, and
Like,
I have
that's
a very
impressive.
nice TV that I've bragged about on the show before, and the visual effects. It's hard for me in my mind to separate The Mummy in 1999 from the movie that I saw in theaters, the same theater 3 weeks later, which is Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. I went to go see The Mummy. I wanted to see it. I like Brendan Fraser, but I was also just sort of pre-gaming how I was scouting locations for where the best place in the theater to sit would be for this magical religious Star Wars experience I was going to have. And so
It's like
I'm
a
kind of
tech
thinking
demo.
about that.
You were like doing like all the speakers were like firing to figure out where to sit.
It's exactly what I was doing. And then the movie starts, and I'm having a good time in the movie. But the visual effects, I'm glad that we brought up that this was 1999 and how groundbreaking CGI was at the time. And if you want to know how hard it is to act against tennis balls, especially back in the day when people were just pioneering it, go watch Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
And you don't get any chemistry in that movie like you do with a number of the characters in The Mummy. So that's a big point in favor of The Mummy. I think The Mummy should be higher on the Tomatometer than The Phantom Menace. I would have both of them around the same place. And so The Phantom Menace has obviously bigger highlights for me, but if you're talking about The Mummy and the visual effects and it holding up, yes, I think it does. And I think that it's a movie that you can put on. I think that's why future generations, maybe even the Eric Strifflers of the world who are younger than me, have fallen in love with this movie, is because you can put it on the small screen and you can still buy the movie. The visual effects do not get in the way of the movie. And that's a big achievement to say 22 years after the fact.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think honestly, a lot of effects from back then are better than today. I can't put my finger on it. I don't know exactly what it is. Maybe it's because it's so much, I don't want to say easier, obviously, and disrespect all the incredible hard work that goes into visual effects. But it's more accessible, I guess. Like the technology has gotten easier. And so it's almost taken for granted. And I think back then everything was a little more intentional. Maybe that's the word. Everything felt more intentional. And yeah, so when you see the first introduction of the Mummy, or anytime that he's on there and it's the full, the CG Mummy, it's imposing. It's scary. You don't even think about the fact that this is an effect. You just are like, there's the Mummy. The Mummy is in the room with them. And you mentioned, technically this is a remake, quote unquote, or a reimagining of the original Boris Karloff film, right? Kinda. So that's the idea, I guess, technically, a new spin on it. But in the same way that I feel like people, the original Mummy was imposing from, I guess that's the 30s probably. This Mummy, I think, is just as imposing, even though he's not technically in the room. Yeah, like you said, you're acting with a tennis ball. They look scared. I believe it. I buy it. And it makes me completely buy that he is in the room spooking it up.
It's really funny too for a boogeyman movie, which Universal's known for. They're the one that did this whole monsterverse with like the Mummy, the Invisible Man, and Dracula, and still doing it to this day. But I think what's interesting about this one is it's the chase. He's coming for you. It's that aspect of it, and I think I mean, I don't know. There's like so many effects that happen with it because it's the mummy, but it's also the sand effect. And if I'm being really honest, one of my other favorite scenes is the scene when Rick, or I don't know if it's the one where Rick does it on purpose or it's the one where he just stumbles across the cat. And he like shows it, and then he does that like, I'm leaving.
When he holds it up and he's like, here, look at this.
I don't know if it's that one or just the one where the cat walks across the piano.
Oh, the piano, right, yeah.
Either one, but the effect of like the face sort of like whooshing by, that particular scene I thought was really great. And also the sand scene at the beginning when Brendan Fraser is at Hamanatra in like the opening montage, and he's like basically being attacked by the sand below. And then they show that like deep sunken sand face thing. Like, I think like a lot of the mummy effects scenes also sort of like make the movie, even when, you know, again, he's not really attacking them at that moment. All right, let's go ahead and think about another thing that folks are still talking about, which is why people are still obsessed with this movie. I mean, I don't know, Eric, what do you think? Like, is it just because we love Brendan Fraser and he kind of disappeared? Is it because there hadn't been movies like this in a while? Is it because it was also like this millennial nostalgia-filled generation that we are a part of? Not you, sir. I don't know. You're a millennial, right?
I'm 30.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Well, what does that
Eric,
put you?
I don't want to put any pressure on you, but this is my big question about this movie. It's not whether it's an enjoyable, rollicking adventure that swashbuckles its way for 2 hours. It's why is it just like hailed as this beloved all-time sort of classic from the last 20 years. That's the hurdle I'm trying to get over.
Yeah, I think, honestly, a thing that's been really missing from movies today, and again, I have to bring it up. You brought it up, and it makes sense. Jungle Cruise is trying to be this, basically. You know, it's trying to be the Mummy for today. I think that the big difference is that you're really more invited along for the ride with a movie like The Mummy. You're invited along for the ride. It feels like the people making the movie are like running along with you through this thing. Like, it doesn't feel like you're just watching. It feels like you're really enveloped by it. And I feel like that's the big thing, is that you are wrapped up, to use that pun again, wrapped up in it in a way that makes you feel involved. And there's more of a like outside looking in quality to movies that are trying to do it today. I hope that makes sense. I think that that's a thing that's really missing these days, and The Mummy gets perfectly right. Like right from the start, it's the it draws you in with the humor, obviously Brendan's charm, and the effects. The effects being again that you actually buy that he's in the room, The Mummy, and so I think that's what really. Obviously, outside of the movie itself, there's a nostalgia element. Like, people are remembering like that time of their lives and stuff. And if you're at a certain age, that might be childhood, so you're remembering maybe like a simpler time. But it's just not sort of like there's no cynicism. There's absolutely no cynicism at all. It is completely. You can feel the heart in it. You can feel its intention is genuine, and it like literally it almost feels like everyone in the room today, there's so many different people in the room that are trying to do this. We got to promote a product, we got to sell toys, we got to do this, we got to set up sequels. And with this movie, it feels like everyone in the room was like, we got to entertain the people. And that's exactly what I think is the lasting impact from it.
Pure entertainment.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, pure just
no
like,
ulterior motives, just entertainment.
Yeah. Turn your brain off. If you took a history class once upon a time, maybe you'll get some sort of juice out of the fact that we are basing this around actual things and rituals that could have happened in ancient Egypt. So I get all of that, but the standing legacy of this movie to me, because Jacqueline also compared a lot of these to Romancing the Stone, which is, or Jewel of the Nile as well, which is like, those are fun movies, but I don't know that people, I would put this more in that category where it's a fun movie to watch and then I'm going to move on with my life, as opposed to something that is as iconic as Indiana Jones.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's not, look, Indiana Jones it puts it in a different characteristic when you're talking about John Williams, Steven Spielberg, and Harrison Ford. Like, let's be honest. And George Lucas along for, the producing and so on and so forth. But it does have its own little niche. And I do think it was a movie of a certain generation that particular time, I feel like from 95 to like 2002, the things that people are nostalgic about from that time period this is when people were in high school. This is when, that generation was in high school. And that generation is the most nostalgic generation that we've had. Like Gen Z people are not near as nostalgic about the things like the way that millennials are. And I also think that they're the ones driving a lot of this on the internet. And what's great is like, getting ready to watch this. It's readily available. The Mummy is like played very often on like TNT. And so like, it's a movie that like you can find fairly easily. So I would say that's part of it, but who are we to judge? We're just going to love it. I don't know why I like popcorn. I just like popcorn.
I have a hot take. I have a very hot take about this movie. So again, this movie came out. Think about when this movie came out, 1999, 3 weeks before Star Wars. But it's like it's that first big summer blockbuster, right? So a bunch of kids starting to get out of school, and there's a whole generation of kids that maybe are going on their very first date, or they can drive now, and they have like the summer to do that. You're not going to see Star Wars because back then there was still just a little bit of a nerd stigma around Star Wars that doesn't exist as much today.
A little bit.
But you also
a lot of bit.
you couldn't even get tickets to go see Phantom Menace because it was sold out for 3 weeks. And so The Mummy is like the cooler date movie where you go. And so I have a feeling a lot of couples got together because of The Mummy, because they went to go see The Mummy, and it's just got that adventure tone where a boy and a girl are falling in love against all odds, against everything attacking them. They sort of see eye to eye, and they have great chemistry. I think that's one of the reasons why there is such heavy nostalgia for this movie. I think it was a lot of people's first date.
I will say, I think the internet has a lot to do with it too, because back then you wouldn't be able to know what everybody thinks immediately. You could really only talk to the people around you. You could talk to other people that saw it. And I think that it was at this perfect time where over the next decade, the internet really came up. And I think that like probably early, you kind of nowadays on the internet, you find your people, you know what I mean? Like if you have like a niche thing that you love, or even like a broad thing that you love, you find out, other people like this too. And I think that happened with The Mummy as well. And that's why it's popular today. You see it on the internet and stuff a lot. I think it's one of those things where it's like, loved it so much, didn't know everybody else enjoyed it as much as I did. Let's all talk about it. We didn't get to talk about it then. We can talk about it now.
And I'll add to the nostalgia thing. I remember my parents were in high school in the 70s and 80s. And that's when like Star Wars and Indiana Jones came out. So my dad would share with me the films of his childhood, so to speak. And so in the early 90s, as a kid, like a tiny kid, was watching Star Wars and Indiana Jones. Then all of a sudden, a few years later, The Mummy comes out. I'd been waiting. It was like, why aren't movies like this? The Mummy comes out, and it's like that same feeling. So it's like this, being a millennial, I feel like that's another aspect too. It's like our parents kind of opened the doors for us and the amazing world of films coming out. Steven Spielberg and Harrison Ford movies coming out in the 70s and 80s. And it's like that carried it through, I think, in The Mummy. Same sort of energy.
And to borrow a song title from a great band, I think this movie now is the best of both worlds because it came out in, like Eric said, 99. So it was before really you had all of this like intense movie scrutiny online. Had this movie come out today with a 2021 lens, there's a lot of problematic elements of it. But we give movies a pass if they were made before that was a hot button issue that was brought to the masses in a way that it is now. And so if there's whitewashing, if there pretty much anybody who is not a white person in this movie is a villain immediately. Like we don't even trust them. We don't want to give them the benefit of the doubt. And so all of that is a problem. But because this movie came out at a time where we know who it is, we've already seen the movie, and we go back and watch it, I don't think that it's judged as harshly, which for better or for worse, I mean, again, Stephen Sommers, this is probably the best movie he made.
Okay, well, you're forgetting about Van Helsing, but that's fine. That's a different episode.
Van Helsing, you have G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra. I mean, this is his opus.
Yeah. Hey,
for sure. Yeah.
And definitely got him a lot of work going forward. I mean, the movie made money. It was a classic, and we'll kind of get into that when we break down for our behind the scenes stuff. So let's go ahead and transition over to that one because there's a lot that went into this movie that we didn't even talk about thus far, even though we've talked about a lot. So Brian, cue us up. So as I mentioned, this movie made a lot of money. It made $416 million at the box office worldwide off of a $62 million budget. But some say maybe 80. Either way, still made a ton. Sixth highest grossing film of 99. I think this was a movie I definitely saw in the theater. I remember that trailer for this movie was absolutely incredible. I was so invested the minute I saw that trailer. What about you, Mark? It was a theater. You said it was a theater one for you. What about you, Eric? Theater, right?
Well, it was also the Super Bowl spot too.
Yes, that's what it was.
This had a Super Bowl, and I distinctly remember watching this, seeing the Super Bowl ad because it was my freshman year in college. That's my age, Eric. And we saw it, and we're all just like all gathered around the dorm room, and there's two commercials that I remember from that Super Bowl. One is a Mitsubishi commercial because they used Ozzy's Crazy Train in it. The other one was just that face of the sand with the mummy and everybody freaking out and losing their minds like, that's going to be cool.
Yeah. No, I remember that one. Was that also the year that they did 3D Doritos? I think that was the one. Remember the girl, like she had the chip go into her mouth, like fly into her mouth?
Ooh,
Ali
that's good.
something.
I got to research
What a
that.
time.
I remember that.
What a
it was
time.
also the debut of Family Guy was right after that Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh God, Family Guy. They hated that show at first. I remember Fox got in so people were like, "What is this?" They were not about it. And then 20 years later, it is still on the air.
The baby talks. The baby can't talk.
What's interesting about this one too is for all of the CGI it had, what it didn't have was those like, oh, this is not really you doing your own stunts, wide shots. Because it seems like everybody in the film, Rachel, Brendan, everybody was like, I'm gonna do. Even the Egyptologist guy that was with her, calling her the plague, he was even wielding a sword. Like that was the other thing too. I really loved watching the stunts from this one. Do you have a favorite sort of, watching Brendan Fraser be Link in his awesomeness stunt, Mark, that you enjoyed?
I mean, I love the stories of stunts behind the scenes. And Eric, I don't know if you saw this. There was a stuntman that like broke both their arms during this movie. Like they were doing something and just like, and it sucks. And like, I hate hearing stories like that, but you're also like, man, they really put them through a lot. But the final product, was it worth it? The movie made a crap load of money. So.
Well, also, I didn't, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Brendan Fraser hurt himself a lot around this time by doing these stunts? Like, didn't he kind of I think he's gone on record saying he kind of messed his body up a bunch because he was like doing things that look, I have all the respect in the world for people that do their own stunts, but also it can mess you up. Like there's a way to do it right. And there's a if you're not a professional stunt person that, you might do it wrong. And it looks great. But like you said, is it worth it? I mean, for the movie, sure. But in life, I remember he said that it really kind of messed him up.
Yeah, several back surgeries to sort of repair from that. If you haven't seen, and shout out to Mark Hoffmeyer, who detailed this along with an incredible documentary that is a part of the DVD Blu-ray that I possess, ladies and gentlemen. Let me tell you, my love from The Mummy goes deep. There's a great doc that breaks down how they did the VFX, but there's a recent GQ article where Brendan sort of details like why he fell off and why folks are so excited for his resurgence right now. He's about to be in a Scorsese movie.
Incredible.
Incredible. Like the guy's really coming back, I think, with a vengeance in a really great way. But yeah, he definitely talks about how his body went through it for this. And he's kind of a cautionary tale now for, I think, that sort of aspect of it. You could ruin your life in the pursuit of your craft. Also, I have to shout out Kevin O'Connor, who plays Benny.
Oh, that's his name. Okay, yeah.
Kevin O'Connor plays Benny. First of all, when I first saw this movie, I was staring at him and I was just like, who is this dude? And he is he's in two very girly movies that y'all probably don't know, but one of them is Peggy Sue Got Married with Kathleen Turner, where she wakes up and Nicolas Cage. That was the last Francis Ford Coppola movie he ever did because Francis Ford Coppola was so mad that Nicolas Cage did that weird accent in it. So he fired his nephew. And he was also in Steel Magnolias. He played Daryl Hannah's love interest in that. He played Sammy, but he had a totally different physique in those movies. He lost a lot of weight in the latter part of his career to the point where like his first half of his career, he's a different looking actor from the second half. Like you have to squint to see it.
And there's a great line that he improvised in this movie, apparently. And it's when Brendan Fraser's about to shoot him because he's the one that's sort of Benedict Arnold him at the very beginning of the movie. So Brendan Fraser finds him on the boat when we're all going back towards finding this lost city. And Fraser just pulls a gun on him. He's about to cap him right there. And he's like, think about my children. And that was improvised. And so then Fraser plays off it and says, you don't have any kids. He's like, but maybe someday. It's a really fun exchange. And you go back and you watch that. You're like, that was improvised. They played it so well.
Yeah, he's a really underrated like side guy in a lot of different stuff. He's great. Yeah.
Yeah, and his sliminess is very true to form, in my personal opinion. Like, his sliminess is what did him in and what saved him. Because if he wouldn't have just been greedy and would have just ridden off with that camel and not gone back for more, he could have lived to see another day. But also being slimy, with him going through literally every religion, like as a way to sort of make sure that he was going to make it to some form of an afterlife, is what allowed him to survive and become Imhotep's little bitch for half the movie.
When he has all the different pendants and stuff is incredible. Yeah, when he's just like, one of these has to work. One of these has to work.
He's just an enterprising young man. I mean, he made a cottage industry out of taking stupid Americans like me who were like, oh, I saw Indiana Jones. I want to go look for treasure. And he's like, all right, I'll take you halfway there. And then you can die on your own and I'll go find the next boat. It's like, I do not hold any ill will against Benny whatsoever. I'll also give a big shout out to my boy Arnold Bosley, who I did love from Hard Target. And he showed up in this. I'm like, that's the guy from Hard Target. But apparently he wasn't in the best of shape when he initially got cast for this movie. And the first time that he tried on his costume, it was like basically a glorified G-string. And so the costume designer went back to Stephen Sommers and they said, hey, Arnold, we might have a fat mummy. We need, to do something about this mummy. And so Vosloo just like started getting in great shape. He'd walk his dog all around LA like I did during the pandemic, and you just get in better shape. And so he got in mummy shape by basically walking his dog around LA because he tried the costume on once, but he also like tried to do an approximation of ancient Egypt, like the way that they would speak back then, with a professor from like UC Davis or something like that. So he really went in deep, and I appreciate that about somebody who, again, you could just be a throwaway villain, but he invested into this craft, and I think that the final product reveals that.
So are you in mummy shape, by the way, now after walking your dog around?
I feel like a mummy now. Like
different kind of mummy shape.
I don't know if that works.
I just remember in the research too, he was like, I'm playing a high priest. Like, there's no way those guys were fit. Me being soft would be perfect. And then he was like, I'll be naked for the whole movie.
Yeah, he's thinking of it like a real serious thing, but meanwhile, it's just like a fun thing.
Yeah. Eric, you got any behind the scenes facts? I hear you got some stuff on this one.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's less of a behind the scenes thing and more of almost sort of sideways slant here. But one of the something I wanted to make sure I got in here, an enduring element of this movie is 2 roller coasters on each coast. The Mummy ride in Universal Studios Hollywood and Orlando.
Yes.
And you just made me think of it because you're asking behind the scenes. I don't know if you've been on it recently. First of all, it's my favorite ride. I think it's my favorite ride ever. And I'm definitely going to get a tattoo at some point that is like in brackets, a mummy whoosh Brendan screams or something from the ending of the ride. The one in Orlando specifically. But the whole, in case you don't remember, the whole idea of the ride, like the cue, is that you're behind the scenes of the movie. Like they're basically saying that on the set there was a bunch of spooky stuff going on, and the ride literally, again, maybe just the Orlando one, it's been a while since I've been on the Hollywood one, it literally ends with you finish the ride and there's a screen in front of you and it's Brendan Fraser thanking you for riding the ride, saying he would have had a better time if he had gotten a cup of coffee. Like he's on the set of the movie basically. And so in my mind growing up, that is like kind of part of the behind the scenes of the movie. Part of the movie is the ride in my mind. And so I don't know if you guys like that ride, if you've been on it recently, but I wanted to make sure I got that in there because it is incredible.
Oh, it's fantastic. It is fantastic. And I'm not a huge theme park guy in my adult life just because I have naps to take and sports to watch. But when I get to a theme park, I do embrace it, whether it's a Disneyland or whether it's Universal Studios, which is I live in the shadow of. And so I went there a couple years ago with Molly's mom, and we went to the Wizarding World and we got butterbeers and it was great. But the Mummy ride was the headline because I'd never been on it before. And I do joke about it that it's kind of like if you get in the bedroom with me. It's very fast, it's memorable, and then you're done. And the movie literally is 45. The ride is 45 seconds long. It's like you start, you go 0 to 60 super fast. You go back the other way. It is such an enjoyable ride. And then you're just like, all right, that was very quick. And
Is your Tinder bio such an enjoyable ride?
Yeah. I think maybe the movie could have benefited a little more from the brevity of the ride. I think this movie could have been about 20, 25 minutes slimmer.
Really?
Yeah.
What?
Really?
How is that possible?
It's 2 hours and 4 minutes.
So good. And honestly, it's too short.
It is too short. Man,
You know, honestly,
You got sequels.
So I was just
yeah,
going
we
to say.
definitely
The Mummy
I don't have
Returns-
his love for the sequels.
Okay, well, I'll tell you. Well, the Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, we don't even talk about. That never happened. But primarily just because they recast the actress.
Yeah, Maria
Very
Bello
insane.
was great, but it just doesn't fit
It
in
doesn't
there.
work.
Yeah, no.
But I did put on a little bit of The Mummy Returns last night after
Yeah.
I finished The Mummy, and I found that just as enjoyable. So how about that, everybody who loves The Mummy? I will defend The Mummy Returns as well, and that movie should definitely be fresh.
So I feel like those two, that's what I was going to say is I think I mentioned earlier, I think I saw The Mummy Returns before I saw The Mummy because I saw it in theaters and then went back and watched The Mummy. I'm pretty sure I was at an age where I was like, oh, this doesn't look too scary. And I went back and caught up on them. But I will say The Mummy Returns, you were talking about, like The Mummy could be shorter, could be longer. But when I jokingly was, thinking it could be longer, it honestly kind of feels like The Mummy Returns is a good enough sequel that it feels like an extension of the first movie. It almost feels like they're 2 in 1. When I think of The Mummy, I don't just think of the first movie. I think of both. I guess the biggest criticism probably of the sequel is the kid. I think, it was a big thing going on at the time where they would just add a kid as the protagonist, like the audience surrogate. And I know that was a big complaint a lot of people had about that movie and to other movies. Even today that happens. But as far as the swashbuckling goes, the vibe of it, the effects, everything, aside from The Rock, obviously, at the end, I do feel like it's almost like you get 2 movies in one. Like when you see like a box set in Target or something like that, it feels like the perfect, like you could watch one and then the other without stopping. And it's just like a perfect double feature. So I think that retroactively adds to The Mummy.
I agree. Very
Have you been
well
on the ride,
said.
Jacqueline? Have you
Yes.
been on the...
I was just about to say I was on the one in Orlando. In
The
another
better
life,
one. I want to make it clear. The Orlando one is longer and better.
it
it's
is
the best.
longer.
Wow.
It is
Yes,
longer.
it's
in
longer
Orlando.
and it is definitely better.
So I was on the one in Orlando. Is it still there?
Right, it's still there. They just updated
Wow.
actually the visual elements of it, like the projection stuff.
Love that. So no, I've been to the one in 99 back in another life when I worked for real corporate overlords. We did our convention at Orlando, and it was Universal Studios, and we all got together and did our little celebration. It
Some
was not
fun
a
happened that
celebration.
night.
Yeah.
Do you like the part where you get like sprayed in the face?
Yes.
I hate
I
it.
Is that
remember
supposed
that.
to be blood or glass?
I don't know.
I
but
never
it's-
know because it's
Ugh.
right when the glass breaks, and I'm like, is this supposed to be the person's blood or glass breaking? I don't know what this is.
I'm always for a nice mist during
Yeah.
a theme park ride,
hot
but now I
theme
got to
park
try
day.
the one at Universal. I think the big question is this, because we can debate the movie merits all we want. The Mummy, I think, pales in comparison to the great Indiana Jones films, but the Indiana Jones ride versus the Mummy ride.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, that's tough. That is tough.
I haven't done Indiana Jones, so I don't know.
Oh my gosh, it's incredible. Well, so that's only on this coast, on the West Coast. So the Mummy ride, the better Mummy ride is on the East Coast. The Indiana Jones ride's on the West Coast. So it almost feels like it's hard to compare them because it feels like different worlds theme park wise. But one's a roller coaster, so I'll give it that. I still got to go with the Mummy, even though the Indiana Jones ride is incredible. The Mummy ride is a full-on roller coaster in the
Yeah,
dark.
I'm going with the Mummy ride as well
Yeah.
for the ride itself. But Indiana Jones is better because as soon as you get off, when you're in the exit line, you walk out and boom, right there is the Dole Whip stand, which is why you go to Disneyland.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Dole Whip stand. I'm about it. All right, kids. That's it for us on Behind the Scenes Talk. The fun is not over, though, ladies and gentlemen. We are about to open up our mailbag and hear from you. So, Brian, cue the music. All righty, then. So, that's it? Just that one little note, Lucy? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, we're keeping it short and sweet today.
Please leave this in because I literally was like, wait a minute, this is not.
I almost did something shorter. Somebody just emailed me yesterday, and all they said was Event Horizon.
Short and sweet, I'm about it.
That gets the point across.
When you email us, you can email us rtiswrong@rottentomatoes.com, by the way. rtiswrong@rottentomatoes.com. You're allowed to type words if you want to defend the movie that you're asking us to review. That always helps.
I'm just saying, normally we get these like magnum opuses of like, this is why, and I love you. But Ray Vickers, man, you are short, sweet, and to the point. He just says, would you guys consider doing a show on the movie Adventures in Babysitting with Elizabeth Shue? Thanks. You guys are awesome. I mean,
yes.
We don't need much more. There's a lot of people that contend that this is a Karate Kid sequel. That this is what happened to Allie after she disappears in the Karate Kid 2.
If this is a Karate Kid sequel, then this is the best Karate Kid movie ever made, because Adventures in Babysitting, I'll tell you what, if I'm ranking on-screen babysitters, you can throw Mary Poppins at me. You can even throw Christina Applegate and Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. I'll put Mrs. Sturrock from the beginning of that movie in the conversation. They all are the Mummy to Elizabeth Shue's Indiana Jones of babysitters. Elizabeth Shue is the all-time cinematic breadwinner when it comes to babysitters. I love that movie. We should definitely talk about the very first on-screen appearance of Thor.
Yes, that is the first on-screen
Eric, have you
appearance of
seen the movie, young man?
No, and I'm curious now about the Thor aspect of it.
I'm not telling you anymore. You got to go watch the movie.
Got it.
Also, let me also add, it's great that you love her as a babysitter, Mark, but is it because she flashes the kids? Because if I recall correctly, she flashes the kids in like the first 5 minutes of that movie.
I'm gonna contend that. I don't remember that happening.
You have to pay extra for that.
I think she does.
Did my parents just tape it off TV and not show me the full Adventures in Babysitting?
I think she does. I do think she does.
She is the sexiest woman alive, even today.
Yeah, even today.
Yeah, she's on The Boys, right?
I am not. Yeah. Yes, she is. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And she's got, I'm ready
Love
for the
me
next
some
season
Elizabeth
of
Shue.
The
I am
Boys.
totally down to do that episode.
If my husband ever left me, it would be for her. He's ever since Karate Kid, he was like, she's the one.
That's the hall pass.
Yeah. Lucy's husband, who, by the way, big fan of Eric and Pretty Much It.
Oh, yeah. Actually, that's fantastic. I love that.
Yep. He got me into it. He's a big fan.
That's awesome.
I'm a big fan.
That's awesome.
I like it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be it for us today. Eric, sir, thank you so much for joining us. This was so much fun.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I could talk about the Mummy all day. I love it. Thank you for having me. This was great.
But before you go, tell folks where what you're working on, where they can find you. And if you can, please, sir, give us a movie recommendation, because we know you are a man in the know.
Got it. Yeah. So, well, you can find me on Pretty Much It. It's you can go to youtube.com/prettymutchit to find. That's a good like starting place, and you can go from there. And I'm not personally on social media as much, so I'm just gonna push Pretty Much It. I recommend checking out Pretty Much It. And then my movie recommendation actually is it's. I've been thinking about it. I don't know why I've been thinking about it so much this week, but it was when I was trying to think of what I should recommend. It's just the first thing that popped into my mind, so I'm gonna go with my gut here. It's a movie from 2005 called Cry Wolf.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Okay.
Cry_Wolf. It was that era. It is I guess it'd be considered a guilty pleasure, but it is, I feel like a lot of people would appreciate it more with the rise of games like Among Us and stuff. You know, there's obviously people play Werewolf, but any of those games where you're trying to find who's the imposter, who is the werewolf, etc. It's one of those kind of movies, and it 2005. It's got the early 2000s vibes for sure, but the behind the scenes of it is really interesting. It's a great movie. I love that movie, and that's my recommendation.
And that's like a bunch of rich kids who get a boarding school, right?
Yeah.
I got to go back and I don't know that I ever actually saw that though. That's a great rec. I got to. Yeah. You check out Adventures in Babysitting. I'll check out Cry Wolf.
Done.
Awesome. Hey, and now we all have homework for our next episode. But before we get there, just remind you all again, wherever you are listening to us, whatever platform, whatever provider, please make sure you rate, subscribe, follow, leave us a review, tell your friends. Just want to get the word out because we really do love this podcast. And according to Vulture, we are fine. That is a little shade, but it is absolutely true. We got to write up
fine
in Vulture.
or like fine? You know
no,
what I mean?
he
like,
literally says in the top line, Rotten Tomatoes is wrong is fine. And you know what? I appreciate any
Take
press.
Take
I
it
will
and run
take
with it.
fine. It's better than bad, right?
Yeah, what's wrong with fine? Again, you're talking to a guy who survived on D- and still got a diploma. So
That's also
I will.
Ellis's review of The Mummy. What's wrong with fine?
The Mummy
Exactly.
is fine, and
There
I
you
will
go.
get it up to, because I love y'all, and you did do a good job defending the movie today. I'll get the movie up to like Rotten Tomatoes is wrong. This movie should be like 67, 68,
All right.
maybe even 70%. I'll give it a C-.
You're still falling
I
short,
can live
maybe
with
like
that.
30% for me, but that's okay.
I'm actually okay with that. I appreciate your malleability, as you say, about your opinion on movies, Mark. I really think we need it more in the world.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Email us your recommendations at rtiswrong. And next week, Mark, what are we doing? Where are we going?
This is something that I think a lot of people are going to give an A or A+ to. And then we had the ending, which I'm sure we'll talk about. We are going deep into The Sopranos. Tony and the whole gang, the whole series, HBO's landmark television, The Sopranos. Followed by the week after, where we go deep into John from Cincinnati.
Wow. I mean, I woke up this morning and I got myself a gun.
I can't wait to talk about this show because I had to do a deep dive of it fairly recently. We'll talk about it next week, but I'm very excited to talk about this because we have The Many Saints of Newark coming out.
Yeah.
which
I
is
was just
a
going to
prequel
ask.
movie.
Yeah, that's coming out soon, right? Yeah.
Premieres
so
at
it's going to be exciting.
premieres at, I think, New York Film Festival. Don't quote me on that one, but definitely one of those ones that I had to keep out a lookout. Anyway, join us for that one next week. Again, I want to thank, again, Mr. Brian Perez, Producy Lucy, our guest today, Eric Striffler, and also my co-host, Mr. Mark Ellis. As always, thank you all for listening, and we'll see y'all next week.